It's YouTube Wednesday! These are mini spotlights that I made myself. I wired them up. They cost a little under $1 a piece to make. You can't beat that. It's time to make the barrels. The best thing that I have found to make the barrels of for the LED lights is tomato steaks. They're kind of green and bumpy. They got little ridges on them. And they look like they're made of plastic because they've been dipped in like a vinyl. They are super cheap at Home Depot or Lowe's or really any garden center. The best way to cut them is the tubing cutter. Okay, this is a great little tool that I use all the time. Get one, by God. First thing I want to do is I just want to take an end off because they have plastic caps in the end of them. And the way the tubing cutter works is you want to nestle the pipe in between those two rollers. Just like that. You don't want it all the way inside, you want it between those two rollers. Then I can tighten it a little bit. I don't want it super tight, I just want it a little tight. And every time I'm going around, I'm giving it like 1/8 of a turn. And now it's cut. And it's a nice clean cut. If I were to cut this with a pair of dikes or cutters, it would crimp the heck out of it, and I don't want that. Both ends are plugged by plastic, and then it's dipped in some kind of a vinyl. But that's not a big deal for us. I'm going to go ahead and cut probably a 2.5 to 3 inch section of tube, which is what I'm going to use for my barrel. Crank these down. And then every time I go around, just a little quarter turn. And then it tells me when it's done. There you go. Now I have a barrel that I can shoot a light down. If you are super worried about reflectivity and shine, the inside of this is metal. You can take a little piece of rolled up sandpaper and sand the inside, and that'll make it shinier. Or you could spray silver spray paint down in there. But I've never had an issue with it, okay? I use them just like this, and they work fine. So that's one. I'm going to cut a few more because I need to make a couple lights today. So I'm just going to knock these out. The LEDs. Blues and greens are the brightest. You also need to go with a super bright LED. When you are buying, look for a pre-wired super bright LED. They're going to look just like the other LEDs. The difference is they have all this extra lead wire on it, and they also have shrink tape up here because they already have a resistor. It is a pre-wired LED. That is a great big deal because that saves a ton of work. Is it more expensive per LED? Absolutely. I am very frugal, but it is well worth getting it with the resistor already on it in order to not have to do all the soldering of attaching the resistor, putting the heat shrink on. It's all already done for you. What you will need to do is separate your lead wires just by pulling them apart to give yourself plenty of room to work. I have a pair somewhere right now. I'm going to use these scissors. I just want to expose about a 1/2 inch of wire. I have brought back my barrels. I have my LEDs, I have a pair of scissors, I have a roll of electrical tape, and I have added a little package of garden training wire. When you buy your tomato steaks, normally right there next to it is a little package of garden training wire. You don't have to use this. You can use floral wire if you want to. Any wire that is going to be stiff enough to support one of the lights. And you'll see what I mean once I get one assembled. Alright, my garden training wire, I want to... So I now have my wire, my LEDs, my barrels, my tape. I'm going to take one of my LEDs, I'm going to slide it inside of my barrel, piece of my wire. My LED is now halfway into my tube here. Take a piece of wire, I'm going to fold it in half, alright, and get a pretty tight bend on this end to make a loop. My other two ends go up against the tube. And then I just want to pick it up. I want to use tape. I'm taping the LED wires to the floral wire first because that sets my distance. And then I'm just running it around the tube, holding the floral wire onto the LED. Okay? If you want your fixtures to be black as opposed to green and bumpy, then continue with your electrical tape all the way up to the end. This is a close-up of the assembly of the LED light. I have my wire, my barrel, my LED, my tape. I find it's easiest if I take off about 7 or 8 inches of tape, cut it, and put it about 1.5 inches away from the end of the wire. Sliding my LED in. Alright, and I want the LED to rest right about the middle. That's the easiest. Now, I simply take my wire, hold it here, fold that end over, squeeze it really good. Now I've got the LED inside and the floral wire on the outside. And I'm simply wrapping this up nice and tight. And I just want to squeeze that in so it's good. These are free to be wired up, and this is free for mounting. Okay, the easy way to mount these in the wall is to take a regular drywall screw and a washer. I do not have a washer here with me right now, but you'd put this on the wall about where you want it. You'd put your screw through your washer and screw it down. The washer is going to hold this tight to the wall, and that frees this up to be pointed in any direction. The floral wire, or garden hanger wire or whatever, allows you to point and move the light easy. And the washer holds it tight. Adjusting it and shooting it in different directions, easy as pie. So that's the way that I mount them. Okay, I want to get to now the important part of wiring. Power supply and wiring. That is a big deal, and that's the part that makes a lot of people nervous. The LEDs are DC, they're direct current. It's the same as battery power. AC is alternating current, and it sends cycles of power. It's actually shutting on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, but it happens so fast that you never see it. Direct current never shuts off. These LEDs get continuous power, just like a car battery or a battery would provide. When I'm wiring them up, I get speaker wire. I normally just buy it at Home Depot. I get 100 foot. This happens to be 18 gauge, but you can use a lighter gauge. The higher the number, the lighter the gauge. 18 gauge is pretty sturdy, and I find that I can run this over doors. If it gets shut in a door, it doesn't break. I like 18 gauge. It's not necessary, but it's not that expensive, and it has a feature which I think is awesome. That feature is that one side of this is steel cable or aluminum or whatever, and the other side is copper. That means that when I get to the other end of this wire, Right now I'm using very small lengths just to show you the wiring theory. But when I get to the other end of this wire, wherever it happens to be, I know which end is which because they're different colored wire. Not just the casing, but the wire itself. I can take an LED light with its stripped end. If red always goes to copper, and you always put the black wire with the silver colored wire, then you're never going to have a polarity mix-up. You won't have LEDs not working because you wired them up wrong. It's always going to be the same. You're not going to blow out an LED by wiring it wrong. But still, it is nice to know, however long this wire is, when I get to the other end, all my reds are hooked up to the copper side, all my blacks are hooked up to the other side. It's not important that we know which one, if it's positive or negative. That's honestly not a big deal. In AC electronics, that is something worth freaking out about. However, with these, not a big deal. And I'm just going to go ahead and wire up 5 lights onto this one piece of wire. You have a number of options as to how you can wire these up. You can use a separate piece of speaker wire with a long length and have all of it come back down to your power supply, or you can do a bunch of 5 and a bunch of 5 and a bunch of 5. But the physical wiring is really easy. I'm just crossing them. I am crossing the wires, and then I'm twisting the wires. Alright, kind of a pigtail type wiring because one ends up looking like a corkscrew. And I want to put 3 on this I want to put 5 lights on this particular bunch. When I'm lighting a set with these, I like to use between 5 and 10 lights per set, and normally I'll put them in 2 or 3 different locations. I can see now that I've got 5 lights hanging from this as soon as I get this guy done. And I put all of the reds that come out of the LEDs onto this copper colored wire. I have here a box of gray wire nuts. Gray are just about the right size, and they work pretty perfect. And I want to wire nut all this. I'm just going to put it down, screw it on until I can't see any bare wire. Works for me. Now I'm going to do the blacks. I've got 2 already wired up. Here's my 3rd. I'm adding my 4th black on, twisting it on and around. And my 5th and last black wire, I'm going to add it in. And I'll grab a wire nut. I want to give that a little bit of a tug to make sure it's good and on there. This is one cluster. Okay? I can have this cluster run to a set. The other end of this wire is going to run to my power supply. Alright? I need to wire up for the power supply that I have right now, which is this one. This happens to be a 300 milliamp power supply. That's what that small MA means. 12 volt. You need to have 12 volt. That's the important part. Milliamps changes how many lights you can have on it. It's always 12 volt. You have to use a 12 volt. You can't use a 9 volt transformer. You can't use a 7 volt or a 21 volt or 24 volt. It has to be a 12 volt for 12 volt LEDs. Each LED is 20 milliamps. So in a 300 milliamp power supply, I can put 15 LED lights on there. If I put on too few, they're going to get more milliamps than they need, and they'll burn out a little quicker. Another power supply option is to go with one of the LED spotlight manufacturer's power supplies. Okay, Thrilltainment makes a great one. Ethereal Effects makes a good controller. There's lots of good ones out there, and it's never really a bad idea to buy their controller and make your own LEDs. I have my 3 5-packs wired up. Okay, each one of these has 5 lights. Each one of them is connected to a piece of wire. Pretend each one of these go to a different room of the haunted house, or a different section of your yard that you're going to light with the LED lighting. Whatever it is you're doing with the LED lights, pretend like each one of these is a different section. This length of cable, of speaker cable, could be 100 feet, it could be 50 feet. They're all going to join up together, and I'm going to keep copper to copper, and then this one's coming in from the exit of the haunted house, the very back end. I'm going to keep copper to copper, because they're all coming in here close to where this gets plugged in. Once again, there's each LED is 20 milliamps, and now all the silvers go together. But I do want to get my silvers together. Each LED is 20 milliamps, and my particular power supply right now is 300 milliamps. That means I can use 15 LEDs. I can power 15 LEDs with this particular outlet or plug. If I had a 600 milliamp, if that's what it said, then I would be able to do 30. Alright, so it's all, for every 100, you get 5 LEDs. A 100 milliamp power supply, then you get to do 5 LEDs. That's good for one room or part of a room. If you have a 1 amp power supply, 1 amp is going to give you 50 LEDs. That's pretty substantial. So something like a 2 amp power supply can pretty much do all the LEDs in your house, in your haunted house. I normally get my power supplies from SciPlus.com, which is Science and Surplus. They're between $4 and $6 there, and they have a pretty good selection of 12 volt with multiple different milliamp power supplies. Alright, leaves me with 2. I'm going to give it a little split. Okay, I'm going to keep those separate. Alright, I'm going to bend this so it's kind of like a field goal. Okay, so it looks like a field goal. And that way these 2 wires will not touch. And I'm going to go plug this in. Yeah. Okay, I'm about to plug this in, so I'm removing all metal things near this far away. What I normally do is, if I'm just testing, I will tape it down to the table. taping it down to the table, and now I'm plugging it in. Plugged in, that's live. 300 milliamps, not going to really hurt me that bad. Some people will argue, that's fine. Argue. I am checking to see which side is which. So I have red on this side, I have black on this side, and I have a lit LED. Alright, so now I know my copper colored ones go here, and I can actually mark that. And my black is going to go on that side. And because I wired everything up the same with those two colored wire, this part is super easy. Just do it unplugged. I am wire nutting that. If you get a bunch of wires coming in from different part of the house, like you're using a 2 amp supply, it's a good idea to use a junction wire so that you don't have 40 coming in one spot. Put 5 together and kind of lead them in like an octopus. You can avoid doing 12 wires together to do it. I normally break my house into zones for lighting, and that really helps. Okay, I'm wired up. I should have live mini spotlights. And I do. What's really cool about these is that there's not much else light in the room, and I can highlight the one thing that I want to show. This room is full of stuff, but all your guests will see is that skull that you wanted highlighted.